All right, as you know, this webinar is being recorded. We will not be posting it on the YouTube page until early November for reasons that will become obvious to you very shortly. I am thrilled to see all of our virtual participants this evening. We will also have, we have Carlos with us for a little while who has some announcements to make, and Laura and myself as well. Before we get too far, I do want to acknowledge the land on which Rancho Los Cerritos is located. It is the unceded ancestral lands of the Tongva Gabrielino people, who are the past, present, and future caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin and the Southern Channel Islands. We honor and extend our respects to the many indigenous people who call these lands home. Tonight, we're gonna build on that history as we share as our featured presentation a video that has been created for something called History Camp America. We were able to do this video with the help of two staff who appear in it, two staff and an intern who were working behind the scenes. One of them was the editor, and then 6 of our fantastic living history docents. So we'll show that in just a minute. We'll also be delighted to get your feedback after the presentation, but I wanted to share a few site updates before the presentation. First of all, construction of phase 2 of that Looking Back to Advance Forward project is nearly complete. It was crazy at the Rancho today with the pathway a little obscured with construction, but that crew is working so hard to make sure that everything is great on the drive up, as well as the overlook path that they are beefing up on the side of the driveway there. They have some smaller things to do, and then phase 2 of this plan will be completed. There is a phase 3 and it's coming in 2023. And the exciting news is it will make that walkway ADA accessible, and it will address some issues out in the parking lot to make that more permeable. So that's really wonderful. I wanted to tell you that in September, we had a big month with Rancho's Walk, during which 334 people walked from Rancho Los Alamitos, or a little bit shorter, on up to Rancho Los Cerritos, and we had a big party welcoming them to our backyard. We had a tremendous gala in September as well, with several hundred people attending, and we raised something like $120,000 for the site. We also hosted Beer Fest. We're just the site, there's an event producer, but I'm told that over 700 people came to that. So these events were well attended and warmly received. Thank you to everyone who attended and or helped with the Rancho's Walk, the gala, the Beer Fest during public hours and more. What a big September that was. Just last Saturday, we hosted our first new program for youth and families. It is the merging of what used to be Creation Station and what will be our Artful Storytelling program in the after-school setting in the near future. And this one is called Artful Storytelling Day. We're gonna do it on the 3rd Saturday of every other month. So the first one was in October, the next one will be in December, and so on. If you have elementary age kids, or really kids of any age, and you wanna drop in for family-friendly, home-oriented or storytelling-oriented activities, and in fact, bilingual stories, we're pleased to have you. Holiday programming is now underway. I'm working with an incredible team of several dozen living history volunteers and those others who are willing to don a costume. We are still looking for a few more volunteers for that program who will wear a costume. We're looking for many volunteers who will help the night of. We hope you'll save the date, Saturday and Sunday, December 10th and 11th, for our after hours holiday tours. It will be kind of like it was prior to the pandemic, with still some COVID protocols in place. Reservations start November 15th, but you can let us know at any time if you're interested in volunteering, but let us know very, very soon if you might want to take on a character or costume role. We have 2 special programs in November, and I'm going to have Carlos tell you about one of them.
Thank you so much, Megan. I'm very excited to let you all know about our upcoming history talk. It is a talk based on the Roots in California Concepts of Home lecture series, and we're going to have Professor Margie Brown Coronel, who is, she teaches Cal State University Fullerton. She teaches US history, borderlands history, US women's history, and public history at Fullerton. The title of her talk is Beyond the Rancho, Creating Home in Late 19th Century Los Angeles. And in her talk, she will explore how families found ways to establish and affirm their social and cultural significance through their rancho life. And she will provide specific examples of a rancho, which is Rancho Camulos, which is located in Ventura County. The lecture will take place in 3 weeks. That is on a Sunday, is Sunday, November 6th at 2:30 p.m. And it will take place at the Rancho Los Cerritos veranda. So I hope to see you all there, and it's a very exciting talk. I look forward to it.
This is a free program, right, Carlos?
That is completely free. Yes, correct.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. We do have an RSVP on our website. It's not required, but it's certainly appreciated if you for Sunday, November 6th.
Thank you, Miguel.
The other program that we have going in November is Rancho Los Cerritos appearing as part of History Camp America. And it's our privilege tonight to show you the History Camp America video. We're gonna just share it internally, if you will. We're sharing it here on our virtual gathering. And then I'll tell you at the end, I'm gonna ask for your comments and I will share a discount code for you if you would like to attend the History Camp America Day, which is an all-day online event, kind of like a conference for history enthusiasts. But let us, without further ado, share the video. I am all set for this, and give me half a sec. Here we are. Ready or not, here it comes, and a huge thanks to everyone who appears in it. Many of them are already on this phone call.
Hi, welcome to Rancho Los Cerritos. We are a national, state, and local historic landmark located in Long Beach, California. We're so excited to have you here. Normally, when visitors come, they only get one tour guide, but today you'll be meeting 6 of our living history docents who will take you on a tour of the rancho to share its multiple layered history of the site. Before we meet our first docent, we would like to acknowledge that this 5-acre site is located on the ancestral and current homelands of the Tongva Gabrielino indigenous people who are the past, present, and future caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin and Southern Channel Islands. We honor and extend our respects to the many indigenous people who call these lands home. As an historic site, our mission is to honor diverse perspectives, enrich collaborative conversations, and inspire broader understanding through stewardship of Rancho Los Cerritos' natural and cultural history. Our goal is to cultivate an inclusive and sustainable world by exploring the historic connections between people and place. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.
Bienvenidos amigos a mi casa, Rancho Los Cerritos. Mi nombre es Rafaela Cota de Temple. I was born at Santa Barbara Presidio in 1812. My father was a Spanish soldier. When I was 9 years old, Mexico gained its independence from Spain, and we Californians became Mexicanos. I was 18 years old when I married an American businessman from Massachusetts, John Temple. He was un capitán of his own whaling ship. He came and settled in el pueblo de Los Angeles. We have a mercantile store here. We will soon get blessed with the arrival of our dear daughter, Francesca. Don Juan Temple, as people call me esposo, became a Mexican ciudadano, so he could own property en territorio mexicano. He bought this rancho from Dakota's relative for $3,000 in 1843. The following year, we hired some native men to build this beautiful Monterrey colonial-style house. It's made of sun-dried adobe bricks. It took the men about 2 years to construct. The adobe serves as a headquarters for our cattle ranch. We stacked the land, 27,000 acres, with 15,000 vacas, or cows. Since we live in Los Angeles, we hired a mayordomo, el señor José Rocco, to oversee the ranch operations. Many vaqueros live here, and some of them have familias. There were probably 30 people living here altogether. Let's go see the mayordomo's room. Este es el cuarto del mayordomo. It looked like it did when el señor Rocco managed our rancho. Look at the talo candelas, the right high chair. Oh, here my husband branding iron. J.T. John Temple. This adobe was a witness to the economic, social, and political changes that took place in Alta California during the late 1840s. When this territory was embroidered in a warfare. During the hostility, the adobe was occupied at different times by both sides. At one point, mi esposo and I, we came here to stay out of harm's way. I brought 2 barrels of gunpowder with us to help the Californians. Another time, the rancho served as una prisión for American prisoners of war. I myself was not in favor of the Americans take this land by force. But when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed in 1848, about half of Mexico becomes part of the United States. Men like mi esposo has to prove they own their lands. He was successful, but many others were not. Gold was discovered in California in 1848, just as the treaty was signed. That brought dozens of gold seekers from around the world. Within 2 years, California became the 31st state in the Union, a free state that did not allow slavery. I suppose that led to another war, as you probably already know. Also in 1860s, terrible weather here in California, both floods and droughts, put many ranchers out of business. We survived los tiempos difíciles, but mi esposo decided to retire. In 1866, we sold this adobe and 27,000 acres ranch to Flint, Bixby, and Company, who were cheap ranchers.
Hello, my name is Jotham Bixby. I lived in this rancho for about 15 years with my wife and our family. That was back in the 1860s and 70s. Let me tell you how we came to own this rancho and what life was like at the time. Many of the men in my family came to California during the gold rush. When we got to the gold fields, we found feeding the miners was more reliable than panning gold for ourselves. My brother Llewellyn and our cousin Benjamin Flint purchased the butcher shop where Llewellyn worked, and we all saved enough money to buy the Rancho San Justo. We bought sheep from the Midwest and business thrived. The Flint, Bixby and Company could now purchase a second rancho, this one. In 1866, Flint, Bixby and Company bought Rancho Los Cerritos from Mr. John Temple for $20,000 in gold. I became the manager of the ranch under the condition that I have the option to buy in. By 1869, I owned half of this rancho. We had about 25 or 30,000 head of sheep, and I hired some very capable Basque sheep herders who had well-trained sheepdogs to tend to the flocks. Twice a year, several dozen sheep shearers would come to this ranch to shear the wool. And the sheep shearers earned about 5 cents per fleece, earning about $2 a day, a fair pay in those days. Once the sheep were shorn, the wool was shipped back to east to the textile factories in large burlap sacks like this one. And the sheep were sent to the pasture for another 6 months. When I moved into the adobe, I found Mr. Temple had a right strong building. I had never lived in an adobe building before or since. We didn't have them in Maine. However, I found the flat tar roofs leaked. This type of roof was popular in Mr. Temple's day, but we are not going to live in a building that leaks. I replaced the original roof with a good New England style that was pitched and shingled. No dripping rainwater in the winter and no dripping tar in the summer. This room was built as a blacksmith shop. It has a forge for sizing horseshoes and making branding irons. Temple's workers must have learned from the Spanish missionaries how to build with adobe. Interestingly, the walls in this room were constructed with those unusual openings that you see high up on the wall. This unique design helps clear the room of smoke and heat caused by the forge. In this room are carpentry tools, and the ranch workers have to fix fence posts and repair furniture. When my cousin John lived with us in the rancho, he used the tools to build a bookcase for our parlor. Now, my wife is interested in telling you about the domestic activities.
Greetings, I'm Margaret Bixby. When my husband and I moved here in 1866, I was dismayed to find that my home was an old adobe, an adobe so far from anyone or anything. But while I share my frustration, I realize I was more fortunate than many. Although it was a pioneer life, I did have help. My most important helper was Ah Ying, our cook. who, assisted by Fan, his apprentice, cooked 3 meals a day, every day, for up to 30 people. And speaking of food, Mr. Temple had planted an orchard behind the house when he lived here. So we had citrus fruit, oranges, lemons, limes, figs. Well, we even had 2 long arbors of mission grapes. They were delicious. Now, we didn't have any vegetables. So once a week, a Chinese farmer would come by and he would provide us with the fresh vegetables that we would buy from him. And this gave us the vegetables, and it also gave Ying the chance to talk to a fellow countryman who could tell him what was happening in the Chinese community in Los Angeles. There is something troubling I would like to note here about the mistreatment of Chinese immigrants in my day. Thousands of Chinese had come for the gold rush. Thousands more had come to help build the Transcontinental Railroad. Yet, as a group, they were subject to intense discrimination, exclusion, and violence in their adopted country. Unfortunately, Los Angeles was no exception. Now, our staples came from Los Angeles, things that we bought in bulk, like flour, sugar, coffee, pinto beans. These are the things that we needed in large quantities. So once, as we were running low, I would make a list for my husband, and when he went on his next trip to Los Angeles, he would purchase them. But a trip to Los Angeles, which was 16 miles away, took 3.5 hours in each direction. So needless to say, the trip wasn't made often. Oh, meat. As you might expect with a rancho of 30,000 sheep, we had mutton frequently made its way to our table. But we also had plenty of chickens, we had fish in the river, and we did raise some steer for beef. Why don't I take you to the dining room so I can tell you how we enjoyed this bounty. 3 times a day, a triangular dinner gong was sounded to tell everyone it was mealtime. After everyone washed up at the tin wash tub just outside the door, and we women and our girls put on our white aprons, we sat down to eat. Now, the dining room wasn't just a place for eating, but also for conversation and to teach our children proper manners. Breakfast, it consisted of eggs, meat, potatoes, stewed fruit, and coffee. Dinner, our largest meal, was at noon. It was soup, meat, more potatoes, 2 vegetables, bread with preserves. Now, we had hearty appetites because we worked hard here at the rancho, whether tending sheep, mending clothes, or rearing our children. There was always plenty of work to do. But supper in the evening was a much lighter meal. It consisted of porridge or cream toast, but every meal included cheese and Ying's wonderful donuts. Now, we Bixby's were of New England stock, so we kept our spices to salt and pepper. Our workmen, though, loved spicy food, so Ying cooked with chilies and garlic and the like for them. Something that was never served at any meal or in between was alcohol. We Bixby's were part of the temperance movement, to the point that when Jotham started selling and leasing the land, in the lease it was written it would be null and void if alcohol were found on the property. Now, at the end of every meal, we would wrap our napkins up and put them back in our napkin rings to hopefully be used for an entire week before they had to be sent to the laundry room. Our cooks also did the laundry, a very arduous task since we had no plumbing or electricity when we lived here. We were so fortunate to have Ying and Ben work for us. They soon became essential members of our household. When we moved from the rancho, Ying stayed on here as a tenant, and Fan became a cook at another rancho. You know, despite my dismay when we first moved here, the years spent at the rancho were good ones. It was a good place to raise my children, and it was nice to be part of the early growth of what was later to become Long Beach.
Hello, I'm Sarah Bixby Smith. We are now upstairs in the main house, and this is my cousin Harry's room. Harry was born in 1870. I was born the following year. When I visited the rancho as a young girl, Harry and I spent our days playing in the garden and the orchard and the barn. Harry loved to collect bird eggs. I think that was his favorite pastime. We also enjoyed playing cards, dominoes, and marbles. On the wall, there's a picture of me, my little sister Anne, and Harry. Oh, the McGuffey's Reader. This was a primer series. I remember the next one was always harder than the last. After I moved from Rancho San Justo, near Monterey, to Los Angeles, I attended public school. Harry, living here at the rancho, was tutored at home from McGuffey's Reader. My doll Elizabeth. Oh, how I loved her. She was a gift from my great-great-grandmother Hathaway. She was so precious to me. My little toy stove, too. Oh, I remember one time Harry and I wanted to use it like a real stove. We stuffed it with paper and lit it with a candle. When the room got real smoky, we decided to get help. Well, Harry was a little bit more clever than me. While I went to go summon our mothers, Harry scampered out the window. We also enjoyed listening to the stories of our grandfather Hathaway when he moved here from Maine. This space served as Uncle Jotham's office in the 1870s. My brother renovated this old adobe in the 1930s. This became his library. My brother and his wife Avis loved to read books in here and listen to the radio. Did I happen to mention that I grew up to be a writer and a poet? It's true. I wrote a book about the Ranchos Los Cerritos when I visited as a little girl. I wonder if it's in the catalog. Let me check. Ah, it's here. Let me find it on the shelf. Adobe Days, Adobe Days. Ah, here it is. In Adobe Days, I also write about my grandfather, the Reverend George Hathaway. He moved to California in 1877 when he retired from the ministry. I loved his sermons. I even benefited from his conviction that children, girls, and boys should learn to read and write. My grandfather, he was a proud abolitionist. He sheltered runaway slaves as part of the Underground Railroad back in Maine. He was also a chaplain for the Union Army during the Civil War. His daughter, my Aunt Martha, came out west with him. Back in Maine, she was a school teacher. But here, she helped raise me and my siblings when my mother, her sister, passed. Aunt Martha, we called her our vice mother. This painting of Uncle Jotham reminds me many people called him the father of Long Beach, even though it wasn't his idea to create a city. That fellow was named William Wilmore. Wilmore leased several thousand of acres of Ranchos Los Cerritos land with the intention of founding Wilmore City. It was his idea that created the city of Long Beach. Uncle Jotham and Aunt Margaret gave money to parks and schools, as well as the first Congregational Church. Uncle Jotham and Aunt Margaret, when they moved to the city of Long Beach in 1880, rented this adobe out. First, it was a dairy, then a boarding house. Eventually, it was an apartment building. During that period, the adobe was rented to those who worked at neighboring farms or at the golf club next door. Before you meet my brother Llewellyn, I am sure you are interested in hearing some of the stories from one of our tenants.
Hello, my name is Manuel Viera. I would like to welcome you into my humble home. Well, it used to be my home. I moved here in 1922 when I was about 22 years old at the time, and I had been living with my aunt nearby. I moved into an apartment in this old adobe with my parents and younger siblings. Soon after, I got a job as the groundskeeper over at the country club next door. This portion of the adobe looked very different at that time. First of all, it had 2 floors. My family's apartment had a large room upstairs and several bedrooms and a kitchen downstairs. The apartment across the hallway here is where my future wife, Concepcion, used to live with her family. And I first met her at the golf club before I moved in with my parents. She had gone there to fetch some water since there was no indoor plumbing here at the adobe. My oh my, she was a lovely sight. Recorded for about 2 years. As I said, the top floor here used to be one large room. And it's where we hosted our wedding reception in 1924. It was so grand. I hear people still have weddings here, but I like to think that ours was the best one here at the rancho. We had about
I'm sorry, we're having technical difficulties. Bear with me for a sec.
Well, we ran the extension cord all the way over here. My wife Concepcion was the happiest bride ever with all her family and friends. Together we had a great time here at the rancho. Well, we'd have to call it our rancho. Concepcion and I spent the first few years of our marriage here. In fact, our oldest daughter, Rosie, was born while we lived here. If memory serves me right, we paid about $10 a month for rent here. Those were the happy years. Back then, there was no door that would lead you to the country club like you see now, right over there. That door was made especially for Mr. Bixby when he lived here. Those cypress trees by the walkway over there were here when we lived here, along with the black locust trees on the side of the house. Our gardens were not landscaped like the ones you see here today, because we grew much of our food here. I built a chicken coop that could hold well over 100 chickens, minus the 25 that came to our wedding. I also planted corn, herbs, and spices like jalapenos and chiles de árbol. Those little red hot peppers. I hunted for rabbits here. I would get about 25 cents per rabbit. And I used that money to buy books. I love reading and learning, and I still do. We moved to the caretaker's cottage at the country club when Llewellyn Bixby bought the property and remodeled it. We were glad when it later became a museum that we could visit. And indeed we did. Concepcion and I celebrated over our 70th wedding anniversary here in 1994, coming full circle. Over the years, we were asked by the museum staff to talk about our memories of living at Rancho Los Cerritos. They recorded us on tape about 3 or 4 times between 1968 and 1989. We were always happy to participate as we walked through the gardens and reminisced about our time here. We have so many memories, but I'm not going to bore you anymore with my old stories, but I do hope you enjoy the rancho as much as we did. Thank you for stopping by.
Hello, I'm Llewellyn Bixby II. I'm standing outside the sun porch of this adobe that my wife Avis and I remodeled in 1930 and moved into on St. Patrick's Day, 1931. I always felt that preserving the adobe was something the Bixby family ought to do. And the project was in the back of my mind for many years. Finally, I purchased the adobe from the Jolton Bixby Company for $1, and then the work began. Now, our needs for the adobe were much different from previous families living here. We wanted to retain, as much as possible, style, flavor, and historical details of both the house and the gardens, but needed a modern home with plumbing, heating, electricity, and a telephone. The architect submitted several plans, and we chose the least formal and the most relaxed. Now, as it turned out, the most important things about the remodel are things that we can't see. I was trained as a civil engineer, so I took a great interest in the designs for the earthquake retrofit. The architect brought on structural engineers to reinforce the old adobe walls. The engineers designed systems that stabilized the walls. There were concrete and iron rebar beams, iron straps embedded in walls over windows and doors, and concrete slabs extending beyond the exterior of the building. Now, that sun porch was added during the remodel as a convenient, weatherproof, alternate way to move from room to room, and became a much loved and much used living area. Oh, during excavation, circular carved stones were found, or actually unearthed. Scholars call them cogstones. The actual function of the cogstones is unknown, but their presence indicates that people lived in this area and on this land for 5,000 years. This is our living room. When my Uncle Jotham and later tenants lived here, this living room was 3 rooms. There was one large second-story bedroom, and downstairs was a bedroom and a parlor. My design opened it up to make this grand and comfortable living space with its fireplace, electric sconces, chandelier, and detailed woodwork. In 1933, Long Beach experienced a devastating 6.4 magnitude earthquake. Tremors were felt from San Diego to Ventura. Damage to our city and surrounding communities was extensive. Homes were shaken off their foundations. Roofs and walls on schools and businesses collapsed. Damage to schools was so extensive, the state of California almost immediately passed the FEMA Act, mandating earthquake-safe designs and construction of school buildings. Most of the damage was the result of unreinforced brick walls crumbling into rubble. Many people lost their lives due to falling bricks. yet there was little damage here at the ranch. The care taken with the seismic work during construction literally saved the building. Oh, we lost some vehicles. This fireplace separated slightly from the wall. But structurally, the adobe was sound. Now I'd like to take you outside and show you several historic details that are preserved for their importance to our family. Welcome to the veranda. Perhaps you have a family growth chart on a door jamb or a wall inside your home. At the adobe, it's outside. Here is our Bixby family from the 1870s. You can see why I left this exposed and not covered with stucco when the house is remodeled. I continued the tradition with our children and grandchildren. Here you can see one section of our 5 acres of gardens designed to preserve historical trees and shrubs alongside modern plantings. There are 2 trees of note that we can see from here. That Morton Bay fig has grown to a tremendous size since planted in the early 1880s. A truly remarkable tree. Preserving this Italian cypress required curving the pathway around it to my private gate into the Virginia Country Club next door. A golfer's dream. These gardens were Avis's pride and joy and a wonderful place for our grandchildren to explore. Avis and I loved our years at the Rancho. This old adobe was our home and our retreat. We are delighted to see that it has survived and thrived for visitors to enjoy so many years from its humble beginnings.
In addition to the tours of the Adobe Home and Historic Gardens, visitors are also treated to engaging and innovative exhibitions related to the Rancho Los Cerritos history and the modern community of Long Beach. Right here in the Visitor Center, our current exhibition, Roots in California Concepts of Home, shares the oral histories of the Mexican and Mexican-American residents who lived and worked here at Rancho Los Cerritos over 100 years ago, and we compare those stories to its modern counterparts to today. Our curator, Carlos Ortega, will take you behind the scenes to take you on a tour of how this exhibition came to be.
Hi, my name is Carlos Ortega. I'm curator at Rancho Los Cerritos, and today I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes tour of our current exhibition, Roots in California, Concepts of Home. This exhibition is the first exhibition that focuses solely on Mexican and Mexican-American history, and the project was sponsored by the National Endowment of the Humanities. The exhibition compares and contrasts historical and contemporary perceptions of home. So we used oral histories of the Mexican-American tenants that lived at the rancho between 1890s and the 1930s, and we compare them with 5 stories of people living in California today. The oral histories came from recordings that previous curators did in the 1960s and in the 1980s, and the contemporary stories came from us reaching out to over 200 nonprofits that deal with social justice and immigration issues, and we sent them a questionnaire asking them what is a story that was meaningful to you, how did that relate to your ancestry, and we asked them to share their roots with us as well. We were looking for inspirational, uplifting stories that deal with the concepts of home. It is important to analyze the way that the Mexican and Mexican-American tenants lived at this site, because their history and their stories were overlooked since the 1960s. The emphasis was more put into knowing how the site and the buildings were preserved, rather than on the stories of the people who lived in here. And it is important to do so because the history and the stories of these immigrant tenants is a reflection of American history. The Mexican and Mexican-American tenants who lived here in the 1890s lived in a building with no electricity, no light, no running water, and the floors were just dirt. They lived in precarious conditions while the rest of the population did live with such amenities, amenities that we enjoy today as well. Since the tenants living in the site didn't have many resources, the building lacked the basic amenities. They had to be very resilient, and they came out with different ways to entertain themselves. They built their own radios as a form of entertainment. The kids would create their own toys out of soap bars and other items, and whenever something needed to be built, they were the ones who created. There was no access to the second floor of the building, and Manuel Liera built a second set of staircases in order to have access from the other area of the adobe home. While the tenants that lived at the rancho were treated as second-class citizens, there are many similarities that we can see in the videos that we display in the exhibition today. The modern stories reflect issues of gentrification, like Danielle, who grew up in an area of Los Angeles that is historically underrepresented, and that with people who struggle in Echo Park, and how gentrification changed the landscape of the site and forced him and his family to move to a different area, Southgate, where he decided to open his own coffee shop that was solely focused on Latinos and offering products from Latin America. There are other issues like Santos, who had a good job in Mexico, and when he crossed the border, because of language difficulties, he had to work at a restaurant cleaning dishes. The treatment and marginalization that Mexican and Mexican Americans suffered 100 years ago continues today. There are people who suffered displacement, gentrification, and the struggles of developing their own concepts of home. And the videos in the exhibition highlight and explore those connections between the past histories and the present. We wanted to develop this exhibition with the help of the community and integrate art into the historical exhibition as well. We reach out to local artist Gloria Sanchez, who is half Filipina, half Mexican, and we asked her to develop a safe space where people could sit down and share their own perceptions and concepts of home. What Gloria did was she reached out to social media and asked people to send her photographs of what home meant to them. Either if it was people, plant relatives,
a place, or pets. And what people did was send us hundreds and hundreds of photographs of what their view of home is. What Gloria did with these photographs is later on integrating them in different areas of the exhibition. Like, for example, in these curtains where you can see photographs that people sent us, and also in some of the pillows where she also inserted inspirational messages such as home is a safe place, sisterhood, and juntos, which means together. When developing this safe space, Gloria wanted to make everybody feel at home, so she recreated a living room where there are familiar elements for anyone coming in. We all have a perception or a view of what home means, and this was one that usually transcends cultures. She integrated photographs of her family, the Filipino side of, that's her mom with all the relatives, and her dad with one of the early pets that she ever had. And the idea of this space was again to make everybody feel comfortable and at home. We wanted to extend the experience of the exhibition beyond the physical space of the exhibition. So for that purpose, we created small seed packages. These are all plants from our native gardens, and they are California native plants that people can take home. And the idea was to encourage people to grab one of these packages and share it with people who make them feel at home, or to have an experience with your family or those who you love, and do an activity together that goes beyond, that expands the conversation of what home means to you.
Thank you for spending your day with us today and learning all about Rancho Los Cerritos' history. If you're ever in Long Beach, we'd love to meet you in person. Bye!
All right, we are officially done with the film. Or the video. We are now going to populate all of you up here with us on the screen, and then we have some questions for you. So bear with us while we do that. Continue to bear with us, please.
Some people just refuse to be promoted.
All right, Laura can continue on with that. Toby says, excellent presentation. I want to recognize those who are here with us, who were part of it. Floyd and Nancy played Jotham and Margaret. Linnea Fields played Sarah Bixby Smith. Raul was watching it and he played Manuel Liera. Ligia Blandino is watching it and she played Rafael Lakota de Temple. And there was one more. Who am I blanking on? Greg Robson, of course, played Llewellyn Bixby Sr. Thrilled to have everyone's effort in there. Anyone who would like to give some feedback or tell us your impressions, either raise your hand and I can call on you, or you're welcome to unmute yourself. But I want to read, Laura Breen says, I'm so impressed with the living history docents, love this, learned and reinforced many things. And Toby says, excellent presentation by everyone involved. Anyone else is free to comment. I want to give some props to Alana Reese, who is the one who filmed the videos, along with Sarah Steichen, our education intern this summer. We worked together on scripting. These volunteers were incredible. All said yes with a resounding hearty cheer, and then got involved in the details of crafting a script. And then practicing and then filming. So Laura, how many hours was it cumulatively that we logged?
Oh, it was over 200.
To put together this volunteer hours, not including staff hours.
Yeah,
so
just volunteers was about 250, I believe.
So pleased with that. Laura Breen, you're raising your hand.
Oh, and I just forgot what I was going to say. Oh, there were a few sound problems. That was I wanted to mention. Did you know, like it kind of was echoing or something? I don't know if that was just because we're Zooming or if there's a problem with it.
Oh, it echoes definitely in the less furnished rooms. And so that was clearly the case.
No, even in the beginning of the video, I had like echoing. It was kind of hard to hear Alana in the beginning.
Oh, that was Andreina.
Andreina, I'm sorry. Yeah, Andreina, yeah. And I don't know, there were a few times where I thought, well, this is kind of echoing.
It could be that it's on Zoom. I'm not entirely sure. And we had the technical difficulties, Raul. I was so sorry that it became me and Laura instead of your presentation there. So we're able to fix that. But
it looked so smooth and easy, but I guess you had to, it looked really natural and easy when everybody was talking, but I'm like, oh, I'm sure that you had to rehearse and plan and all of that. You look like professional actors.
They did an incredible job. Yes, it was fabulous that we have these resources of you volunteers that are so happy to represent the Rancho. We're so pleased.
I have to say, in all honesty, it was the hardest thing I have ever done for the Rancho, but it turned out okay.
There is a lot of pressure when you're being filmed. It's a lot different than, just greeting people when they're there in person. But yes, we're so thankful that you were all so willing to do it and that you did such a great job.
That was no easy feat, that's for sure. Nancy, thank you for that candor, that it was the hardest thing you've done at the Rancho. It is a difficult thing, and there is a lot of moving parts of it, and we're just thrilled with how it came out. Why did we make it? I want to share with you two things, but first I'm going to put up History Camp America, and History Camp America is a thing for history enthusiasts. That is, so basically it's a conference for people like you. It's coming on November 5th. And if you were to click on, I'll give everyone this code, but if you were to click on there, you could go into annual history camps, and then you could go to History Camp America, and then you could look at History Camp America 2022. You ready for this? And then you could see the site tour previews. And we are just one among 7, I believe, different organizations that are having sites. There's Andreina, who's in our development office, but they're from not just all around the country, but from San Juan, Puerto Rico, so offshore as well, although certainly part of our country. And here's one from London, England. Benjamin Franklin we claim as our own, but little did I know he has a house. And then out in the water in Wisconsin and elsewhere. So it's not just the 7 sites that are on tour, but that day we'll also have a couple dozen history presentations, author talks, different things going on. It's from 9 to 5 East Coast time on Saturday, November 5th. But beyond that, we have the links that are good for an entire year. So you can zoom in for that day if you buy a ticket, and the tickets are a little pricey. At this point, they're $99 a piece, but it's very entertaining and informative. They're actually they're $5 less if you use that HCA Los Cerritos 22 code in your registration. They're giving a discount to members of our organization. So I put both the History Camp America link and the code in the chat there for anyone who might like to be part of that day. Really cool program. I participated last year just because I was fascinated by it and was so galvanized by the experience that I was thrilled to be able to bring it to the Rancho, and that all of these wonderful volunteers and fellow staff members said, yes, this is a crazy idea, but we'll go ahead and do it. And so we started that process in July. I think we filmed in August, and then Alana edited in September, and then we submitted by the end of September, and they are now, or early October, and they're now doing everything they can on the back end to make it ready for the event. We had a question for all of you. Laura?
Yes, we're going to ask you, since we are touring different museums and house museums, what is your favorite house museum? Where is it and why? So I'll share mine. This was a little difficult for me. I couldn't think. I haven't been to very many house museums, basically the ones around us, but I have been to one very memorable one, the Unsinkable Molly Brown House in Denver, which I really did enjoy. It was beautiful, the incredible Victorian furnishings, docents, not as good as our docents, but they were good docents. But what I thought was fascinating about it was her name wasn't Molly, and she hated that the journalist gave her the name Molly. Her name was Margaret, and she wanted to be called Margaret or Maggie, but the journalist insisted on calling her Molly Brown. So that's mine. And so I will pass the baton to somebody to share their favorite history museum. How about Linnea?
Hello. I'm in dark, but my favorite museum is located in Hartford, Connecticut, and it's the Mark Twain House. And everything about it, I don't have a favorite. I just love the whole Mark Twain history. I think my favorite part of the my most favorite part is the story where his children would act out plays in the living room. And I forget how many he had, but that was mine. And I think I'm going to pass it to Terry.
Mute. All right. Well, I like all museums. So when I say which museum is what I like the most, I would consider I just went Sunday to the Rubel Castle. I'll bet nobody has been there. The Rubel Castle is a man named Rubel that built his own castle. He grew up as a young kid, left his father died when he was very young, and he left his mom on his own, and he was like 10 years old, and he started building a fort near the dam. It was near up in it is in Glendora, And if I'm not going to talk too much about it, you just need to look up and you'll find out it's the most interesting place you ever saw on this planet. He built that place out of scraps, anything he could find anywhere. On one wall, for example, he has the rear end of a motorcycle going into the wall. On the other side, about 10 feet away, he has the front end of the motorcycle coming out of the wall. In between there, he has a rhinoceros head, like a rhinoceros is trying to ride a motorcycle and he gets in an accident, running into a wall. Crazy stuff like that. Stuff like you have seen in your grandfather and your father's garage that have been collected for years and years. He was lived in the early 50s, 60s, and he was quite the character. I won't say much more, but the Rubel Castle, R-U-B-E-L. And once you start reading about it, you will just go, wow, I didn't even know that place existed. That's it. And I will pick on Floyd.
You're muted, Floyd. Still muted.
Something happened to our,
There you go. You got it.
all right. Are we still unmuted? Okay. Well, that Rubel Castle, rang a bell for us. And we went there.
Oh, you know what I mean then, Floyd, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's impressive. And a whole lot of rail put into the thing. What? One of the things I thought is, I think the King of England. I think it was Prince Philip. Yeah, that's Prince Philip actually visited there. He came to do some work. You're tapping your shoulder. Here. I have to talk louder.
We have a hard, your audio is running, but it's very low.
Okay. I don't know if I can do much better than this.
Stay close and then we can hear you better.
Okay, I'm as close as I can be. I might be part of the monitor. But yeah, it's kind of a problem with this computer of mine. But anyhow, we enjoyed that, and I kind of am partial to some of the museums that we went to back in Maine. And, we went there for a photo tour. All talking about all the people that we know throughout the early times of the United States. Anyway, I'll turn it over. You wanna talk?
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, so he just turned it over to me. My favorite place is in Ohio, and it's outside of Cleveland. I believe it's Peninsula, and it's called, I don't even know if they're still doing it, but it's called Hale Farms and Greenfield Village. And the village is a whole village, and every summer they pick a year. I've been twice. One year it was 1849, and the special, what they were discussing throughout the whole village were childhood diseases, all in character. It was really fascinating. And then the next time I went, they had picked the Civil War, I think it was 1862, and they had a Civil War wedding going on, and we even got to go to the wedding at the church. And I mean, it was absolutely fabulous. And that was probably, I don't even know how long ago it was, and we haven't been back to it since. And it was absolutely fascinating, and I saw what living history can do. So that's one reason we got into it at the rent show. I can't see who's on there, so I can't pick anybody. Just somebody talk.
Lori Adams has her hand waving, so we'll let her go next.
my favorite place was the most recent that I visited in Portugal. It was the headquarters of the Knights Templar, which they morphed into the Order of Christ in the early 1200s in Portugal. And what was so fascinating, well, I've been studying the Knights Templar for quite a while, but what was fascinating is they built this headquarters and then they just kept on adding for more than 500 years. And it took, a good hour and a half to go through it. And it was just absolutely amazing is all I can say. We went through the various architectural styles through the centuries and how it came to being. The history behind it was the Knights Templar were the richest entities in Europe at the time, and they had loaned the King of France gobs of money, and the King of France couldn't pay them back. So he said he revolted against the Knights Templar and started killing them all off. Well, guess what? He didn't kill them all off. And they went into Portugal and made a deal with the King of Portugal and said, the King of Portugal said, we need an army. And the Knights Templar said, we need land. So they made this deal and they gave them the land. And Portugal got back their area of Porto, which they wanted from Spain. So I was in my glory, history and architecture and everything. So whoever wants to go next can go next.
Okay, who wants to jump up? How about you, Vicki? You're a big traveler.
Yeah, I was thinking, what houses have I seen that were fascinating? I wasn't thinking of going out of the United States, but I have to say in the US, one that I really enjoyed seeing was Mount Vernon. To see George Washington's books and his study where he did all sorts of things. And I love color, and just seeing the colonial colors that they painted rooms and all, I just loved it. At that time, they didn't spend much time on the slave issue, which they probably do now. So we really didn't see slave quarters or anything like that. But anyway, that was one I really enjoyed. And I'm going to add one. And if I get to go out of the US, a couple of trips ago, we were in Italy, and we went to the home where Leonardo da Vinci retired and spent his time, and to see his workroom with all of his little bits and pieces was fascinating. So I'll pass it on. How about you, Marcia?
All right, I think I'm unmuted now. Can you hear it? Okay. Well, Laura took my ultimate favorite because I beat Molly Brown for 7 years and more doing than Molly Brown, but as you said, Margaret Brown. And then the second one was Rubel's Castle. I've done that ever since I had you because we did it together. But there's so many I've done, so I'm trying to think of all of them. I like all the ones on the Underground Railroad. I like the Henry Box, where in Massachusetts and all those. There's so many, but Greenfield Village is the best place to go in Michigan because then you get all of them and you can go right to Henry Ford's home. So I guess I like any home except mine for now because I've been here for so long staying here. And I hope I get to come back to you guys, because if I was anyplace else, I would say Rancho Los Cerritos. So thanks. Let's see. Tell me who's there. Is Joyce there? Joyce and Martin used to come, or I
Yep,
can't
they're
see
here.
today, so I can't tell. Okay, then pick Joyce and Martin if they want to say something.
Okay, this is Joyce. I was gonna pick Mount Vernon as well. Mount Vernon, because when we went, there were costume docents. They were in the house as well as on the grounds. So we saw them working in workshops and also tilling the field. So we learned about plantation life, and they did touch on slavery because during that trip, we also went to see some of the other homes of the era, and they did touch on slavery that time. So that Mount Vernon really liked it because living history docents.
This is not Joyce. And I've got, actually, I'm divided between two homes. To me, the biggest and best in the US is the Biltmore Mansion in Asheville, North Carolina. And, but if I was to say locally, I would say the Gamble House up in Pasadena, I think is just a gorgeous place to walk around in. I enjoy all the woodwork. I'm going to pick, how about Laura Breen?
I'm sorry, I'm just drawing a blank. So I can't really, I've done quite a bit of traveling in Europe, but I can't even remember all the places. Yeah, and I can't think of too many historic homes that I've been to in the US either. So sorry. And who else is left here? Did Linnea talk already?
Yeah, she was first.
Oh.
There's Joy and Hyam or Barbara?
Yeah. Barbara?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, I'm trying to get my video to work and it's not working. So, of course, my favorite home is Rancho Los Cerritos, but years ago, I went with my son back east, and one of the places where we stopped was Jamestown. And that was my first experience with living history characters, and I was so impressed with that. And so to see the Rancho doing living history characters for as long as they have now, it's just so rewarding to be able to appreciate the effort that those of you that are living history characters go through to portray the members of the family, employees, whatever of the Rancho is just very fulfilling for me. And it just brings a lot of joy to the fact that the Rancho is able to portray the history of the Rancho through those characters. So it's much appreciated. Floyd and Nancy and Greg and everybody else.
Okay, I think we've heard from everyone except Joy and Hyam. Did you want to share your favorite house museum?
Okay. Yeah. What comes to mind is when we were in Norway, gosh, it's over 20 years ago, and so I can't remember the name of the place, but it was so interesting because what they had done is moved historical houses, and this means really old houses sometimes, into one central location. So you could go from house to house, seeing different stages of life over the centuries. And one thing I do remember very vividly is for the first time seeing a sod roof where plants, flowers, grass, etc., were growing on the roof. It just somehow it tickled me to see that. That's the most vivid memory I have. People, they had docents in costumes as well, and because we are involved in Scandinavian dance, we were very excited to see them wearing those beautiful costumes and talking about the life that was lived over the centuries. I'm not sure if in that encampment they actually had a stave church, but the Norwegians are known for their wooden stave churches, which occasionally, unfortunately, burned down. So there are fewer and fewer of them to be seen. So that's our vivid memory, or at least my vivid memory. I don't know, is there anyone left who hasn't said something?
Oh, there's Megan.
Megan.
I had a fun experience just before the pandemic at the Bell Mead Plantation in Nashville, not North Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee. And I don't know if it's whiskey, some kind of alcohol. It was a plantation for growing whatever it is that you put in that alcohol. Sorry, I don't know. But the tour was given by their education manager, and she's a descendant of slaves from that region. And so while there's the main house, and then there's sort of the back part of the house, there was this no man's land in the middle, and that's where the tour was. So we saw the rest of the house, but she sat us down for a good half the tour and talked about what life was like in the passage in between. And it was so profoundly moving, not just because of who she is, but because the absence of anything to look at while she was talking. It was fascinating. It reminded me of 30 years ago when we were creating the master plan. We had an IMLS study of the Rancho, and one suggestion was that you take every furnishing out of the room and the docent tells the story. We didn't go in that direction, but sometimes the absence of any visual stimulation can be the very thing that galvanizes you. What I love about what all of you have presented is there are so many different types of historic house museums. It's very different from a science museum, even pretty different from a natural history museum or a history museum, right? Historic house museums can be hyper-local, and yet like ours and like Mount Vernon, I'm not equating the two in terms of their relevance to history, but they tell a part of the American experience or the Scandinavian experience, wherever it is that you're going. It's a good place to visit, and it was really hard for me to choose because that's what I do on my vacations, and I imagine some of you do the same kind of thing, but finding that local history. Laura, you want to walk us out here with some of the upcoming things at the Rancho, especially the one in December?
Yes, in December, we are going to have more wonderful living history with after-hour tours on December 10th and 11th. And, oh, I think you were talking about the Volunteer Appreciation Party, which will be on December 20th. And since Martin mentioned his favorite house was the Gamble House, I would like to tell you that we have just arranged a swap with the Gamble House. They are going to be coming to visit us in February, and we'll be giving them tours, and then they're going to host us back at the Gamble House, a date that I wanted to wait and talk to the Volunteer Council before we set that out. So that's coming up, and of course, there's all kinds of volunteer opportunities happening at the Rancho, which you can sign up on. Volgistics, gardening on Tuesday morning, Guard and Crafts, first and sometimes third Fridays, 9:30 to 12:30. And most of all, public hours, volunteers. We are always in need of more people to share our wonderful museum with people from near and far. So if you would like to help me out with that, that would be fabulous. Storytime readers, if you like to take the time to read some stories to some young kids, they really love it. And that's on Tuesday mornings. If you've never done it before, come and observe and see if it looks like something you'd like to do. And we are also in need of bilingual storytellers on the third Saturday of each month. And next month, decorating is coming up the Monday and Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So I think I covered it all. And thank
We
you.
are skipping a November gathering for volunteers, but do put December 20th on your calendar. We hope that is our traditional party back in the sun porch where staff recognizes all that you do throughout the year. So unless we have a COVID emergency, which we're some wood, we're all knocking on that it doesn't go in that direction, fingers crossed. December 20th, it's a Tuesday, 5:30 to 7. We hope you'll be at the Rancho with us.
Do you have a question, Marcia?
Yeah, I just want to know, I was told by someone who was campaigning knocked at my door and said, surprised when I answered, they said, "Oh, Fanny," and I go, "Oh, sort of." And then she said that school tours were starting again in January at the Rancho. Is that true?
No, that is not true. We are
Okay.
hoping to start to pilot a new version of the school tours in the spring.
Okay.
Is our hope.
So the person that was on the board from the Rancho that's running for something in the city was the one that told me that, and I was very surprised to hear that. So
It could, maybe they got us mixed up with Alamitos. I know they're doing school tours as well. So I
no,
don't
but
know.
she's
who it
on your
was.
board, or she's on the. That's why I was shocked. I thought,
I don't know
well,
who it
that's not-
was, but Laura's correct. We're not.
Okay,
able to
that's
do
fine.
school
I
tours.
just wanted to know because I was going to beg the doctor to get me faster, but okay, thanks.
You got a couple more months at least. So.
Well, I still want to come back before. It doesn't have to be for school tours, but I really wanted to do that thing you had on the wedding, because that's only a short time one coming up and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
there's another one at the end of the month.
on the 29th of October,
Yes, yes.
that was the one I asked for, because it still will be light enough to get her way to get there. So I'm
Well,
hoping
thank
she's.
you everyone for being here
Thanks.
this evening. I hope you enjoyed the hard work and the bounty of their labor. Lehia, Greg, Floyd, Nancy,
Raul.
Linnea, and Raul. What an amazing thing, as well as Carlos and Andreina. And then behind the camera and doing an incredible effort with editing is our own Alana Reese. Thank you all for being here tonight, and we'll see you soon around the Rancho.
Thank you. Bye-bye.